I'd like to invite Heidi Cullen up here to present the conclusions and recommendations from Breakout Group D on media.
Excellent. All right, so basically we went down the list and transparency. Oop. Is it on? I don't know, is it on? It's on now? Okay. Don't worry, it's okay. So we focused on the launch process, media training, and then transparency of IPCC meetings and activities. And so we had 8 recommendations yesterday. We have 10 more today. So we're going to have a lot of meetings. We suggested that pre-launch, we should have a first meeting. It's concurrent with the production of the first order draft. We would convene a meeting that would include the TSU Comms folks, the working group co-chairs, and the Secretariat Comms folks. And the goals would be to establish strategic communications objectives, develop some key messages and talking points, and also begin to develop the FAQs. So that's the first meeting. A second meeting or subsequent meetings, to be determined. So after the first draft of the summary for policymakers is completed, we would convene these additional meetings, so comms scoping meetings as needed. Again, we're going to have the TSU Comms officer, working group co-chairs, and the Secretariat. And now we're kind of drafting and then refining the key messages, not the headline statements, providing talking points, FAQs, but really to just bake the comms portion into this. Now we're at the launch. And so there was, I thought, some really just very interesting discussion on, I think, some success stories that came out of AR, which was to kind of have some downtime and so I think what we found was that there were some limitations to restructuring the dates upon which the meeting would happen. Sure, we would really love it if we could go from like Wednesday to Wednesday, but there's some limitations around why that is. So rather than that, work the structure, and then just recognize that, going into the weekend, we would have Sunday as downtime and then have a press conference on Monday. Having that downtime on Sunday would actually give the authors, I guess, on the one hand, we're giving them time to rest, but we're also giving them time to do embargoed interviews, practice their talking points, prep for the conference, and then also at the same time, provide countries to prepare their own national outreach strategies. For example, do things like translate the communications materials into national languages. I think there was one example of Tom Stocker basically having 48 hours of no sleep and going straight into a press conference. So recognize that that's not the ideal situation to talk to the world's media about a very policy relevant topic. Okay, also with the launch, thinking ahead and thinking about new technologies, I think, Nick, among others, just really was thinking ahead and recognizing that there's probably going to be new webcasting technology that should be a lot better, a lot cheaper, and to have the global press conference, and then simultaneously, when possible, again, now we've kind of built in this embargoed time frame by having Sunday off, where we could have regional press conferences using local authors, and hopefully having good webcasting technology to do that, to really ensure that when the report is communicated, it's done so on a truly global basis, and it's drawing upon and actually supporting non-native English speakers. So I think those two recommendations are tied together. Next topic was media training, and this is both doing training for scientists, but also doing outreach to the media. So first and foremost, media training for authors, it's a priority, and the time that's set aside to do that has to be protected. It's important, I think, again, lessons learned was to link that training to an actual opportunity to be used, and then have that done in a region so that the authors get regional media context. And so this was just, I think, again, a lesson learned that if you're in Norway and you're briefing the Norwegian authors, really good for them to get a feel for what the Norwegian media landscape is like. Critical also is to include presentation training, so that while it's good to be able to have media training, talking to journalists, it's also really important to have the skills to present a really solid, strong, clear PowerPoint, and then provide a template so that there's consistency across IPCC. Then on the media side, strengthen and deepen already existing media outreach for journalists pre and post launch. And this is the things we touched upon yesterday, explaining the IPCC process, what's going into the report, and then also really thinking about the global reach. And then providing media outreach in a national context. So again, really working with folks in countries, the comms directors in the countries, sure that this is happening on this tiered level. Another component in the category was to, I think, build upon some things that had started during AR5, and that specifically was convening editorial board meetings with key media outlets. So, meeting with the editorial board of the New York Times and the Financial Times, and have that feature the chairs and co-chairs. On to the topic of transparency. I think there was just a basic understanding in our group that we just needed to be clear about the rationale for limits on transparency. Also be said as we have to be transparent about the fact that there will be non-transparency at points in the process, and just be upfront about that so we're not setting up expectations that we can't meet. High priority that formal draft be made public. So I think as we talked about transparency, there was a recognition that we needed to prioritize, and that really, in this case, the highest priority was releasing that formal draft. And note, it's important, it's simple to make the draft public and post it on a website, but there has to be some capacity built around that to provide the necessary media strategy and support. For example, having scientists available to provide the context, because you can't really just post the report. You actually are then going to get calls likely from media, and you want to make someone available to talk about it. And then be open to the potential to web stream select events, for example, like this meeting. Recognize that, again, all processes don't need to be open. And that's it.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Richard.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I wasn't able to be involved in your group, but chairing another one was made it kind of impossible. I feel that some of this is slightly unambitious, if I'm completely honest. I think that, for example, if you've got scientists, there'll be one IPCC author from many countries on the planet. That person is the perfect person to do outreach and communication in that country. So for me, almost the root of it is support for communication, and almost an expectation or a desire from the centre that they will do communication in their country. Empowerment, training, support, expectation. And for me, some of this starts too late in the process. It's like, why not involve the media in the scoping phase? Why not follow through with one documentary, ideal radio documentary or something like this, how it works, so that by the time you come, even to the publication of the first draft, which there will be stories, already how the IPCC works, what it does, is already out there in the public domain. And I feel that the sort of first meeting, around about the first draft, again, it's too late in the process. I feel that, we've been talking about embedding communications strategy right in there from the start. I just feel it's a little bit too late, really. I would just urge more ambition, I think. Get in there early, maximize stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Chris?
I think these are really good ideas. I just wanted to plant one more. I think that the universe of spokespeople for IPCC products is still too narrow, and that we ought to think about ways to train scientists beyond the lead author team to be able to present the reports. And we ought to be thinking about training authors from each working group to be comfortable with material across the entire set of products. And I think we can really amplify voices by investing further in author training.
Okay, open up the training.
Yeah. Hunter.
That was a great set of recommendations. That was a lot of hard-won knowledge, I know for a fact. So thank you for all that. Just a couple quick things. The recommendation for the Monday press conference, I think maybe it goes without saying, but I think you guys would obviously need to rethink the time zones based on where the actual meeting is. So I just want to flag that. And then on the idea of having local, regional press conferences, I think we ran this before, so just want to flag it. You know, you got to figure out, like, are these authors flying back, and how you account for their flyback time. And if the authors are not flying back, that means they're not at the meetings, and then they're uncomfortable talking about it because they weren't there at the meeting. So I think the regional press conference is a really great idea. I just got to account for those couple of realities. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Thank you. Would you like to
Great.
respond to that, Heidi?
Did you get that? You got it? Okay. We got those in the notes. Thank you.
Okay. I think Jim wants to make a final comment.
Yeah. In response to Richard about the comments about moving earlier in the cycle, particularly Yeah. To the scoping process. I mean, we did discuss this a little, and I just wonder whether you would catch press interest if you're only talking about process in the absence of content to actually give it context and kind of meaning. And we did talk specifically about, you know, the role of media in a scoping meeting. But I think there's a tension there which we discussed between trying to engage a wider range of stakeholders in a scoping meeting, while at the same time trying to open up to media. Because we felt, for example, that if you'd engaged business communities, they might be more inhibited by the media presence than the scientists were, for example. So I think there are tensions between these different objectives.
Hunter?
I really like the recommendation about making the draft report public. I do want to say that's another example of where we have a lesson to be learned from the National Climate Assessment. The draft National Climate Assessment was put out for public. In fact, the scientists had to account for public comment even. It was really impressive. So, and that went beautifully.
Thank you. Pauline, are you good to go? Are you using PowerPoint? Excellent.